Guys, our best sleep today, slept on game of the week is the Floyd of Rosedale. Maybe the best rivalry trophy in the entire game. Minnesota at Iowa. Iowa's an 8.5 point favorite. What? 2:30 p.m. on CBS. This game, of course, brought to you by Best Sleep Today. If you're tired of being tired, don't want to deal with the CPAP, the bulky mask, the machines, or expensive surgery, talk to Dr. Mason and the gang over at Best Sleep Today, bestsleeptoday.com. Mercifully, guys, first point that I have to get out here, mercifully, the CBS crew finally has a game that matters. They have been dragged through the mire with some of these games, and that is looking like one of the worst TV deals in quite some time, to be quite honest. Just the games that have been on CBS's airways in the afternoon in the aggregate have just paled in comparison to what you've had with Fox, with ESPN, with ABC, the Disney channels. And we saw some ratings, some stats come out. The SEC and the Big 12 are kind of lapping CBS and the Big 10 when it comes to viewership in this afternoon window. So I'm happy for the fellas over at CBS to get to watch a good game. But this line, what, 8.5 in favor of Iowa, a Minnesota team that's coming off an absolute drubbing of Nebraska. I'll kind of throw this to whoever wants to take it here. That line makes no sense to me. I feel like Minnesota is going to play Iowa closer than that, even though Iowa's at home.
Well, I think the computers definitely don't like Minnesota, and for good reason, because the start to the season was really brutal. Most people probably last watched, I guess a lot of people probably watched on Friday night in a standalone spot against Nebraska. That was a good look for them. Before that, the only view that most people, not sickos like us, but most people probably had only seen for like maybe a quarter of the Ohio State game,
Yeah.
because that one got out of hand really quickly. But this is a better Minnesota team than it was a couple weeks ago. They handled a really solid Nebraska team at home last week. The run game finally got going. The pass game is doing just enough. I'm taking Minnesota to cover this spread here. I don't necessarily love Iowa catching that many points. I'd have to go back and do the research. I didn't have time to do it for this video, but somebody can probably tell us in the comments what their record is against the spread with this big of a gap, because it feels like since 2020 at least, you'd always take the points in this spot. So we're going to take it here. Usually I'd lean into a weird line like that, but I think Minnesota finally got that ground game going. Like I mentioned, I think the pass game has just enough to keep a really solid Iowa defense honest and keep them from just swarming the backfield completely and really stifling everything. So I think Minnesota can keep this close. And then on the other side of the ball, Minnesota defensively, the game plan was great last week against Nebraska. They just completely made Dylan Raiola's life miserable. Iowa's offensive line is nowhere near as bad as Nebraska's offensive line, but there's some talent in that front, and Iowa is not going to challenge you down the field. Iowa is 134th in average depth of target. Minnesota, for their liking, is 89th, so they're not that much better, but that feels like a NFL versus JV in comparison to what Iowa's doing. So I think Minnesota can kind of load the box here. I was going to get theirs on the ground because they just have a lot of dudes and they play nasty and play you down to your level. But I don't like Iowa running away with this one. Anytime the team that Iowa's been facing is competent on at least one side of the ball, it's been a pretty close game. So I think that trend's going to continue.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Trey. I think this is probably an ugly one. I've got Minnesota plus the points, but Iowa winning as well. I've got it 19-16 just because I wanted it to be an ugly score, and I was trying to think of how I could manipulate the score to make it look bad. So I'm going 19-16 on this one. I think the key here for Iowa is running the football. Obviously, they really haven't been able to pass with any sort of consistency. Minnesota has held four teams under 62 yards rushing this year, but their other totals that they gave up, looking at it, is 138, 133, and 253. The 253, funny enough, was to Purdue, and they won that game. So I'm not even sure that the rushing total is an indicator if Iowa does go for a big number in the running game. They just are going to have to, right? Because if Iowa doesn't run the game, they're not going to do very much on offense. And so they have to find a way to run. If Minnesota can shut it down like they did last week, it's, lights, that's it. Minnesota needs to keep their own ground game going as well. Iowa's let up some lower totals on the ground. Penn State last week, though, they kept it close with a real powerful ground game. So, I think a lot of this is going to be just an on-the-ground slugfest, punts, field position, find a way to rip off the big one where you're out there for another big 40-yard game, something like that. Feels like it should be a close one, and if it's at home, then yeah, I'm going to go probably Iowa this direction. Honestly, nothing would surprise me in this one outside of Gronowski throwing for 300. Like, that would be the only shocking result for me.
I know Vegas is not in the habit of throwing away money, but I cannot see a way that Iowa comfortably covers this number. You guys have laid out the passing stats. Minnesota is ninth in rushing defense. And furthermore, on the offensive side, not only are they more versatile and able to throw the ball, not at an elite level, but they'll be able to move the ball through the air a little bit. Drake Lindsay has done a fine job at quarterback. They don't turn the football over either. They're +5 in the turnover margin for the season. That's top, I believe, 30 in the country right now. Iowa, to cover this number, they have to force turnovers, and they're going to have to completely bottle up Minnesota's offense, which certainly could happen. But I don't know that Iowa runs away from the Gophers either. So I'm on the points. It feels like we are stepping right into the trap that Vegas wants for us. So, when Iowa wins this game by 20, I guess we'll talk about this on the live show, but yeah, that is one too many points to be given away in the Floyd of Rosedale. I do like Iowa to win this game at home. Very close though, very low scoring, very close game.